Guys, and I think we're at the top of the hour. We've got a lot to get in for this one. We may be a minute early, but I want to make sure that we get started on time because we've got a lot to get in this one. And I want to leave plenty of time for questions as well. Again, we've kind of designed these as panel discussions. Some of it, we have some questions. I have some questions I want to ask on the panel, which in this case is, again, Ken and Rob, who I'll introduce here in just a few minutes. But I also want to get as many questions from those who are coming and attending this live, so we can kind of again understand where you guys are on this journey, kind of understand some of the questions and things that you guys are having, and get some answers from the guys who are doing this every day. So for those of you guys who are just joining, thanks for coming. Again, it's a webinar series we did. We did the initial one on more of a generalized AI, generative AI terms, kind of helping out set that up as far as what's there, what are the risks involved in that, how you should be approaching it. And in this one, we're going to kind of delve into another area of that, where we get into more of the business side of things for that. How does it deliver on market expansion? And then we start talking about a lot of the financial impacts, a lot of things that you guys should be looking at from a business perspective, again, which is where all this resides. The goal for these sessions is more geared towards executives, those people who are looking at that, than the technical side of things. So we really want to talk about the impact that the use cases you may be looking at, or they're going to be introducing today, are really seen throughout the discussion today. Again, there'll be a little bit of a setup for this. If I can get this to move. So we'll do some quick introductions. We'll talk extremely briefly on TAG CXO as the one who's introducing this with Ken and Rob, and then move into some of the macro trends. Again, there'll be some presentations that Rob and Ken will be doing on this. Brief introduction again, just for those who missed or may have to kind of go back and recircle back to the conversation we had last time as far as what is AI, so we all know we're on the same page. And then again, get into the business side of things, the financial impact. And then, as an organization, how are you looking at moving forward with these things, and how do we see others looking forward to this? And of course, drive straight into the panel discussion, which although it's number 7 here, will be the primary part of this whole thing. So welcome for those who came. If you're in this live again, this will be recorded, number 1, so this will be out there on YouTube and other channels, and we'll get you information on that. But feel free to interact with us. We have the hands up, as all you guys are used to using Zoom, I'm sure by now. The ability to have a QA session on here. So if you have some questions, enter in the question and answer area, and we'll make sure it's either answered live or towards the end. We'll make sure all those are touched on in some way. And then again, just making sure that you guys are able to interact with us. I think was just the most fun part of this. And see if I can move slides here again. Again, I want to keep this very brief, just as a quick introduction to TAG CXO, who is sponsoring this event. So again, as you can see here on the screen, it started as a carefully selected. I love that way that's stated. The tech executives we have on our team are all enterprise 500 leaders who have been doing this for a long. They're not career consultants. They're people who have been doing this job for a long time. The TAG CXO's passion in life and everything that they're doing is to find where there are gaps in leadership from a technology standpoint in the companies that they work with, and find solutions for that. Find ways to be able to fill those gaps and make sure that you're moving ahead in the right way. And the viewpoint on that is leadership is the most important investment that you're going to make from a tech standpoint. Everything that you do beyond that is going to be at risk, or ROI will suffer if you don't have the right tech investment and put it in that place from a leadership perspective first. And the job of that is to make sure that those things do well. So a lot of things there. TAG offers a lot of advisory services, fractional and interim executives to go with that. Program management, retained executive search, you can see there. But again, the tagline there is always Paul Tyson, who started this, has always been his call in life, is how do we solve leadership issues within the mid-market and small market people that we're working with. And of course, that's where the technology leadership solve came from. So there's a lot more in that. We can definitely answer more if you have more questions about TAG CXO and who we are. But we want to jump straight into this. I want to introduce again, if you guys were on the last one about a month ago, to Ken and Rob. Ken and Rob have been doing this for, we see 30 and 25 years on this, but for a long, long time, with lots of different experience in different areas. Again, these guys are working in the real world like a lot of us are. And as you can see, Ken has, the title of 100 most influential people in data, and one of the top leaders in our artificial intelligence. Both these guys have been doing this for a long time, so we're super excited to have these guys who partner with us on these to be able to kind of introduce some of the things that we're talking about. I do want to, before we get into this, we had a quick poll question. This is one that I think we used either the same one or one very similar last time, just to kind of gauge where people are at in this journey. So how many of you have implemented generative AI in your organization? And again, you can kind of see this, the options: not started, planned it, piloted it. We have a generative AI in production. So we'll give everybody about 10 seconds or so to kind of give their thoughts, and then interesting to see where this comes out. So we're kind of sticking with this one question. I think it's one that we are very interested to kind of see where people are at. All right, Zach, we're ready? No. So we asked this last time on our last one, and we got a little bit different perspective. So I think, again, a lot of it depends on, who's on and the different things we have. So most have not started. This will be a great session. And again, if you haven't been able to go back and watch, it's recorded as well. We'll send that out too for those who come to get more of a general introduction. But if you haven't started, then again, this is a great place to be, to get some more understanding of what's there, what the risks are of acting and not acting, and those type of things. So planning it, piloting, very cool. And nobody with it in production right now. All right, with that said, Rob, you're up next. I'm gonna let you kind of take it from here, and then we can kind of jump in.
Thanks, Tim. Well, listen, where we want to start today is the business environment that we're in, because it's the context of how these tools can help us from a business perspective that's really going to determine how it's going to be leveraged, inside your organizations, and what is going on from a macro perspective. Listen, many companies have had a challenging year, or really a couple of years. If you think about the costs that have increased in their business, whether that was through supply chain, whether that was through labor availability and wage inflation, we're heading into an environment now where cost of capital is raising and a lot of debt is being refinanced. And then there's even this possibility, listen, who knows? Nobody has a crystal ball, but there is some question and concern around, as the consumer starts to fatigue, maybe the pricing power that companies have enjoyed over the last couple of years are starting to wane. And so you can imagine that the backdrop that we're in right now must be creating a lot of strategic conversations inside boardrooms and inside the executive teams as they're preparing to present to the board their plan for next year, and what are the levers they have to pull in their business as they want to try to maintain and preserve and even grow margins in a difficult environment. And our thesis here is that artificial intelligence and automation is among the best tools available. And we want to walk through specifically why that is and how the companies can leverage AI and automation to expand margins. So let's go to the next slide and talk a little bit how. So again, a challenging economic environment or concern about the environment that you're stepping into, and how does AI and automation play a role in preserving or expanding margins? Well, first of all, any number of things that can be done around automating processes, while not only taking hassle out of the system, taking cost associated with drilling that process and getting it done quicker. You can utilize your assets more optimally. You can drive productivity of the employees with the new tools that are available. Listen, in a constrained environment, how do you maximize the value of your existing customer base, and very thoughtfully and deliberately look for ways to expand and extend those relationships? And also, by the way, what are new pathways to revenue based on your data estate and some things that you have knowledge in the industry that others don't? There's a lot of things that you can do with artificial intelligence to go out and expand margin. And in a world where profitability is the new growth, perhaps for a short period of time, this can be incredibly important. Let's go to the next slide. So listen, the results are in. AI and automation are not new. People have been doing this, for years. We seem to be talking about AI way more here recently because of generative AI and ChatGPT and how that took the world by storm. You remember in our previous conversation, or those of the call, we've been doing AI for decades, and we're going to walk through how you see that coming to life in a lot of ways. The process change that you're going to deliver is much more important than simply writing a faster or quicker email, which is some of the things that we talk about with generative AI. How fast we can generate new presentations. Listen, that's that's interesting. But if you want to impact the bottom line of your company, you're really talking about renewal of processes. And so there's a wide range of ways that you can do that. And that's what we want to walk through in the call today. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ken, who's going to get us started to set the base context for what do we mean by artificial intelligence and how do we see it coming to life inside of companies that can drive impactful performance.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I think that's right. I think especially for this conversation, when we're talking about expanding margins and really having a meaningful impact on an organization, understanding what we're referring to as AI, at least in this presentation, I think is really important. So on the next slide, we kind of talk about AI in general, and as Rob said, we've been doing AI for many years. Back in the 50s, the term was originally coined. Applying to the use of computers to take over functions that were typically performed by humans, these calculations kind of functions. And we use them a lot for statistical analysis and finding patterns and information and forecasting and processing data and things like that. Move forward to the world of machine learning, which was really big in the 80s, 90s. Very powerful algorithms that allowed us to find patterns in data faster. Optimization algorithms were improved. Natural language processing started back then as well to really count words and do sentiment analysis and these kinds of things. And then more recently, we got into deep learning because primarily around the compute power enabled us to do much more complex type of algorithms that actually perform very similar to how your brain works, right? With neurons and the interconnected networks of information that wouldn't have been possible 20 years earlier. But neural networks allowed much deeper types of analysis, which gave way to like image analysis and being able to do image recognition and these kind of really great use cases that we saw over those years. And then most recently, generative AI, just really in the past couple of years, the ability to not only which is an extension of deep learning, but what's powerful about it is not only finding patterns in unstructured data like text and images and sound, but it's actually able to generate these things. And that's where the word generative comes from, which makes it that much more compelling because it's able to create language. It's able to write poems. It's able to write stories. It's able to summarize documents and write code and create art and create music and brand and things of this nature. So this generative aspect of these algorithms is extremely powerful. But these are the words that you're hearing around AI. It's all within this umbrella: machine learning, deep learning, generative AI, artificial intelligence. They're just kind of extensions of the science, really, that we've been after for some time. But on the next slide, I think what's meaningful for leaders of organizations that are looking at artificial intelligence to have a meaningful impact on your margins, which is really, again, the theme of this presentation. It's really an understanding that everything we saw on the first slide or the previous slide was about the learning, which is right in the middle, this machine learning and how smart these algorithms are in finding patterns and able to recognize things within large amounts of data. But what makes a system kind of artificially intelligent is the fact that the system is actually automatically observing information, right? So it's either monitoring cameras or taking a stream of data in. Maybe it's watching orders as they come in, but it's observing what's going on in the world around it, like we do as humans. It's remembering all of that stuff, which is kind of what we do as humans. It's learning from those patterns of data. So it's spotting trends and then it's making decisions based on those trends. Well, what should I do about this now? I've got a list of my most valuable customers, but what should I do? What are my goals? What are my objectives? What are my constraints? All of that's typically in kind of rules and business objectives and business goals. How do these algorithms make a decision and then take action, which is pop up an ad or control a robot or send an email or whatever the action is at the very end. You want these systems, if they're really self-contained, they're doing everything from observing the world in real time, collecting that information, learning from it, making decisions, so populating, moving that information through a decision framework, and then taking actions. And then what we're doing is we're monitoring how these systems are actually controlling parts of our business process. And the reason it's important to go through this is really to frame that understanding of how an artificial intelligence system, not just an algorithm, but a system kind of comes together to automate parts of your business. So just a couple of examples here on the next slide, next couple slides. So this one is around claims adjudication in the healthcare space. So right now in our healthcare industry, the leading companies are a claim is presented from the provider for approval. That claim is automatically scanned, which is image processing. If it's a paper document, that information then goes through an algorithm that applies certain tests, like is this potentially fraudulent? What's the what's this patient or member of our patients entitled to? What's the potential health outcomes of this decision, and so on. And then in the end makes a decision whether or not to approve that treatment or not approve that treatment, or what action to take as a result of that. And all of this happens through an automated process of intelligence, of data ingestion, data memory, learning, decision, and then an action, which is a final decision. Prior to that, this process, and for many other companies, this process takes hundreds, if not thousands of people to go through each of these processes. And when you talk about the health outcomes and health decisions, these can be quite expensive resources as well within an organization. But if you can codify that knowledge and codify those decisions into these algorithms, you can automate these processes, and reduce the labor, reduce the cost, increase the accuracy, and improve the speed at which patients are getting the information they need to move forward in their health treatments. But very similar on the next slide, you've got customer self-service. So how do we reduce the labor in our call center by understanding the needs of our customers, and potentially even proactively contacting those customers where we anticipate that they're going to have some need, either a billing need or a delivery need or some kind of service need based on their journey. We are building systems that monitor customer behavior, that have learned from that customer behavior what customers' needs are, why customers typically call into our call center. And then we can apply rules that say, hey, when we see this kind of threshold for a certain customer segment, automatically take an action, send them an email, send them a text, or maybe send them to the call center for an outbound call to avoid service disruption, whatever that is. So again, it's this process, an end-to-end process of monitoring what's happening, learning from that, making a decision, and then taking an action. Finally, one more would be in the area of route automation. So if you're in any kind of fleet managed service, routing those trucks takes a lot of planning, a lot of asset planning, what trucks are available, what drivers are available, how do I get from point A to point B, what's this customer entitled to, what are the restrictions on property or whatever happens to be. There's a lot of constraints and rules that have to go into how do I optimize to kind of minimize the mileage to respond to these tickets, reduce my cost, reduce my labor dependency. Again, a very manually intensive process, a lot of sticky notes, a lot of knowledge that's been around for years in the heads of planners and routers and so on. But how do we codify this so that as we're seeing tickets come in, we can automatically understand the availability of drivers and trucks and assets, automatically put them into routes that get automatically optimized, and then make a decision on which driver, which route, which truck, and then automatically send that back to the onboard unit so that the driver has their route for the day automatically produced. So it's these systems. So when you think of artificial intelligence, think of these steps of ingesting data, learning from that data, applying that data in real time, those learnings in real time, through decision engines, which help you control actions within your organization, all the way through to integration into the business process and business application. To me, that's an artificially intelligent system that's behaving like a human would, making decisions and taking action. So when we think about, those are three examples, but if you're on the next slide, if we think about this process of, well, any process within your organization where you've got a lot of data to ingest, you've got humans that are analyzing that information or having to review that information, maybe pull, bounce it up against policies, look at pricing, look at any kind of entitlements and contractual reviews and things of this nature. On the next slide, you'll see that this pattern really applies across the board to multiple business processes within your organization that are either aligned to increasing revenue, decreasing cost of goods, reducing selling costs, reducing admin costs. I mean, you can align these to nearly every row in your income statement. using artificial intelligence for things like lead generation or price modeling or customer lifetime value optimization to increase revenue, or optimizing a supply chain or your assets, as we talked about a moment ago, or even the reducing the calls into the call center, reducing the number of call center agents I need on hand to service my customers and provide them service, reducing your selling costs and so on. But you can see how AI can be applied across the board to really help drive this margin expansion, which is the increase of revenue and the reduction of costs.
Thanks for that, Ken. Listen, when you and I are talking about this not too long ago, one of the things that we talked about was not only are there financial impacts associated with all that, but you're also creating an engine that allows you to scale the business much more quickly. Imagine with this kind of process discipline and automation and intelligence, how much more quickly you could acquire other companies, or even just grow with this engine now in place. But with that being said, let's bring ourselves back to this board prep we were doing. So we've got this outlook. There's a lot of questions around our strategic plan for next year, and what you would want to be able to see, as Ken was walking us through, how do these things map into the income statement, and what is the benefit we're trying to drive towards? And listen, you could pick. I mean, it's in a lot of ways a crisis of opportunity. There's so many places where you could go. So part of this is, aligning to your strategic objectives, or it could be simply an exercise around prioritizing the biggest benefit that wants to direct your action. But what you would want to expect from your teams that are driving these kinds of discussions in your organization is this traceability to business value. And you are going to want to have your CFO sign off on these numbers, right? This isn't funny money, but this is a commitment that the organization is making. The reason we're leveraging technology is to improve business performance and drive margin expansion. And so that's, I think, what we would love to see and advocate for is more and more this commitment and this discipline to go beyond the conversation around the capability and the shiny object, which is very exciting, but to have that discipline and that commitment to having traceability to the business value that you're going to be delivering, and have alignment with your financial team around how that's going to show up in the numbers, who's going to be accountable. It's such an important thing that we all say we want to do. We want projects to be on time and on budget and on value. And the reality is so many times we really miss that opportunity to clearly lock in the benefit and the gain that we're trying to deliver. So let's move to one next slide. Continuing to move forward to some of the success factors. So, okay. So listen, it's, very compelling, a lot of places to go. How do you make sure that as you're focusing as an organization, that you're positioning yourself for success? And it really is a question of focus. Where are those high impact use cases that you're going to have the commitment and the opportunities of business to focus on in next year, doing that prioritization? The other thing is bringing in the devoted multidisciplinary teams. You're going to want legal and finance and operations and your technology team working in concert to deliver on these solutions. Very difficult when, say, the technology team is going to lead it, or, oh, sales is going to lead this transformation effort. It really is this integrated set of capabilities that come together inside of an organization to deliver. Obsessive metrics tracking. So what's that thing you can't change what you don't manage, and you can't manage what you don't measure? One of the things that you think about in these kinds of programs. So you've identified the benefit. Have you put yourself in a position to be able to measure the KPIs and the financial impact as the program's moving forward? Very important to make sure that you have that metric tracking in place. Some of this is going to require new skill sets, rather that be on your technology team or in other parts of the business. How do you make sure you prepare people to be successful? As these processes change, roles and responsibilities may change. How do you make sure that the training is in place, that folks are ready for their new role and they're held accountable to deliver their work in a different way? Test and learn. One of the things that can be a real challenge around these programs is you go huge, big bang. This is not an ERP replacement. This is a different type of animal. What you can do is have very focused projects that allow you to test and learn and iterate and continue to improve in a part of the business as you work your way towards those financial impact. This accelerated time to learning and celebrating the fact that we're going to be working across sprints. We're going to learn and make adjustments as we go. This is an important cultural aspect to how you drive these kinds of programs. And of course, talking about AI, a lot of things around how are we making sure that we are being ethical. We're making sure we're rooting out bias, making sure that we're compliant to the regulations. You guys may have seen that the first executive order just came from the White House around AI. So how do you make sure that your programs are keeping those things in account? So with that, back over to you, Ken.
Yeah, so I think the poll in the beginning of the session was quite interesting, depending where you are in your journey of deploying AI within your organization. I think the poll was about generative AI, so maybe there's more traction on AI in general. But what's interesting about AI and more specifically generative AI, since it's very new and kind of the cat's out of the bag on it, a lot of employees are already using it. Some companies are getting in trouble because information is being lost and shared to these open large language models. We're really in a point where, as a company, we have to decide what are we going to do about artificial intelligence within our organization. We have to make some decision. The board is waiting for some answer on, are we leaning in? Are we driving margin expansion using AI? Or are we not? And if we're not, then what you at very least need to do is protect your organization, to audit what's going on and make sure that you've plugged any gaps and you've set policies, codes of conduct around the use of artificial intelligence and algorithms, especially now with this executive order coming out and more pressure being actually today is the AI Security Summit and Safety Summit in the UK, with all the global leaders talking about the same issues around risks and compliance and fairness. So you at very least need to make sure that you're protecting your organization and that you're being ethical. But you may be sitting there undecided about whether or not you should lean in and drive use cases, or whether you should hold back for now and just focus on protecting the environment and then protecting the organization. And then even making that decision should be one where the leadership team is aligned on what the opportunity is, understands the potential risks and the potential benefits, has a clear understanding, and has done some exploration to make a decision on whether they should focus on protecting the organization or moving forward. So chances are you're in state 2, 3, and 4. There really isn't a wait and see mode, because that's a very dangerous mode, because you're unprotected and you're potentially missing opportunities. But it's really around one of these. Hopefully you guys are squarely in one of the bottom 3. And on the next slide, what we're seeing is companies that are just really trying to grapple with this. A lot of executive teams, even CIOs saying, listen, to be quite frank, there's a lot of information coming our way on this thing. I don't know how to make heads or tails of it. A lot of the large vendors are making promises of capabilities that seem fanciful, and just need help figuring out what this thing is and what it can do for my organization. And am I missing an opportunity? I mean, is my competition moving faster, and should I be doing something? So to help, if companies that are in that situation, we've seen this kind of progression, which is kind of stage 1 is just get together, align, make sure the executive team has an understanding, get rid of anything that's confusing the issue around, false assumptions around what AI is. And then move forward to saying whether or not we're going to protect the organization, which is plugging the holes, as I mentioned, and or then continue to move forward into selecting use cases, proving these use cases, and demonstrating value as you continue to mature your capabilities along the way. So with that, we'll turn it over to Tim to get us into a panel discussion about what we've talked about here so far.
And I appreciate that with Rob and Ken. And again, I love the fact that I know you guys could have talked for hours on this, because I know we've had our long conversations ourselves, but I appreciate you guys getting this in 30 minutes so we can kind of make sure we focus on some of these panel questions. Again, guys, anybody who's on, please, there's a Q&A session at the bottom. If you have some questions you want to ask us based upon what you've heard, or just in general with what you guys are doing, we'd love to hear those questions, and we will make sure we address those. and appreciate it. One thing I would be interested in when you guys were talking was, I think we carried over maybe the generative AI in the poll from last time, which was more of the topic of the last one, but what the difference would be for those who are maybe an AI that was just general, not generative, but just general AI, and if that would be a different poll result. I have a feeling it would be. And some people, it's oddly enough, don't even know that they're using it now. I know a lot of platforms have AI built into them. Next best product, a lot of things that are data oriented that they might even know it. But I would be interested in seeing the difference in that. Maybe we'll cover that next time. Let's jump right in. And Rob and Ken, again, feel free. I know I'll address these to one of you usually, but if both of you guys can chime in if you want to. But my first question, when I look at some of the stuff, I look at the tree where we kind of looked at all the different things that are out there. And again, I know that's different for every probably client you talk to. There are a lot of opportunities and places where this stuff can really create value. As an executive, when I'm looking at this, I think sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's a problem. How do I really understand where we're supposed to start with this? What's the right kind of path for me to kind of get started and understand where do I start? Rob, I'll start with you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think we talk about, how do you decide how to decide? Is really the thing. And how often really is it that you imagine you've got your senior leadership team pulled together talking about, priorities for the business, linking that to their IT strategy, right? And their AI strategy, coming up with the key criteria that they're prioritizing, those different opportunities around, to stack them up against one another. Is it really about differentiating in the experience realm, which of course there's a lot of things you can do in the experience space around self-service that provides a better experience for the customer, but also drives the return in expanded margin. But how as an executive team often are you coming together to really align around those strategic priorities, tie it to your IT strategy and do a prioritization effort, and then stack hands, by the way, as an integrated team and agree that this is where we're going to focus. And so it really can be, I think, that simple, making sure that IT and technology AI strategy is tied to your business strategy and you have your integrated executive team aligned. Because otherwise what happens, right? I mean, this is what we see all the time. Otherwise what happens, you've got some sponsor somewhere who feels passionately about something. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't tied into the core of the business, but it's certainly part of their functions agenda. And they're out there pushing that drive, through in the organization. Is that the best place to put your time or treasure? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So what we'd really advocate for is a commitment from the executive team to come together, first align around how they're going to make the decision, because what you don't want is sniping and second guessing, kind of relitigating these decisions later. But it is just as simple as bringing that senior executive team together to align around priorities.
Yeah. Perfect. And just to kind of continue to build on that, and first of all, when we were looking through the stuff, I love the fact that we're moving beyond the cool, which is all there. I mean, everybody's talked about the cool, the tech part of all the things we're doing, to the real financial stuff. I was blown away. Like I said, I was super excited when we got into just seeing all the income statement, the things that are effective. I think that's awesome. You mentioned metrics earlier too. So as we're looking at all the possible outcomes with these different things we kind of mapping out to choose, what are the right ways to kind of look at how we measure those to make sure that we are being successful or we're not being successful, and not we're just taking on something just to take on something?
Yeah, so the thing that is really encouraging is when you see executive teams more and more focus on what is a successful project.
Yeah.
And for the longest time in this technology space, a successful project has been based on, have we gotten the capability to market within the time frame and budget we said we were going to? And then we're all congratulating ourselves that, hey, we got it done. I think what you're starting to see is a greater focus on the success of a project. By the way, it'd be great if it was on time and on budget, and it should be. But the success of a project is that it gave us the return on that investment we set out for in the first place, which means we've been really clear around what that financial benefit is going to be. We've been really clear about how we're going to track it. We've been really clear about who's accountable for delivering that benefit. One of the other challenges that you sometimes run into in this, because it's in the technology realm, is we put this on the technology team, the IT team alone, to deliver these benefits. At the end of the day, though, the process that's being changed is happening in the business, right? Inside the field operations team, or inside of finance, or inside. And so what you really want to do is get that accountability for delivering the benefit through the business owner that is ultimately being impacted by the project. And one surefire way to do that, and listen, this is pretty inconsistent, and sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. But one surefire way to do that is to build it into next year's budget. One of the things that we've seen be really successful, like I'll give you an example. Back to, say, self-service in the contact center space. Listen, it is hard to keep people staffed up in these call centers. Attrition, of course, is through the roof. We talked about for forever. And what you could do is build into next year's budget that you're going to have, through attrition. You wouldn't even have to do a layoff, right? Just through the natural course of attrition, you'll have, 35% less folks in your contact center. And it's in the budget. It's built into the budget. And so programs where we've seen those things happen, not surprisingly, are much more likely to capture the return on that investment that was expected.
Yeah. Well, and I think that just highlights is in all things is there's a difference between planning and what the outcome is actually going to be. And so that just helps you as you develop those metrics. And I come from a data analytics background, so putting those metrics in place is key, and understanding what things are going to affect that. So whatever you start with, you're managing along the way to make sure you're getting what you plan it. Going into a little bit more of an investment side of this, Ken, as we look at all these things that we should be doing, unfortunately, none of this stuff is free. There are things we can get as far as resources on the internet. You can attend webinar events like this and learn a lot of really cool stuff, but none of it's free. So, if I'm an executive and I'm starting to develop plans or working on how we're going to develop those plans, how do I think about my initial investment and the ongoing time and treasure that I have to plan for how I'm going to manage the cost of having to do this, since it's not free.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's not free for sure. One of the benefits of being in this space that I've had the pleasure to enjoy is that these analytic solutions pay for themselves over and over again, right? I mean, I think 5x has been kind of the lowest return on investment I've seen in initiatives, and it goes up from there. These are because companies are just really so poor at maximizing their use of data and information that these capabilities offer tremendous benefits. So, I mean, whenever I get questions, like we had a question recently around the deployment of AI for a specific use case, and the question was around, well, what is that going to cost? And I really think the question should be, what's the expected benefit? What are you trying to drive? You need to drive a 3% reduction on labor dependency, and I don't know, to Rob's point, maybe the call center. Well, how much is that worth to the organization? And then how do we get that to happen? And if you ask the question, what is this solution going to cost? You should be able to answer, this is the expected result we want to see. And that connection between the expected result and the cost is often missing. And so it's much more fascinating to have a conversation around the benefit and then create a path towards that. Because if I told you that this thing costs $5 million, that might be a non-starter. Wow, I don't have $5 million. But what if I told you that the benefit was $200 million? Then all of a sudden, how quickly can we get started? So I think the cost is relative to the benefit, and these types of solutions are nearly always beneficial.
Yeah, I love that. And again, like I said, it goes back to how we expand on beyond just all the coolness of it to the financial impact of the income statements that we feel like it's going to get. We also talked about a lot of different outcomes that are possible with this, and I think probably for most people here that are listening, they can probably start to correlate some of those to their own business as well as I've done some of the clients I've worked with. So based upon that, though, there's, again, as you say, there's almost, I'd say limitless, but there's tons of different projects that we could probably go with this. How do we kind of set in order kind of, well, number one, should we try to do everything, or should we be coming up with some plan on how we actually proceed to go from plan to plan to plan as far as which one that we can actually make the most impact on? What are kind of your thoughts on how someone should be approaching that to maximize their investment?
That's a great question. I mean, if you look at the EBITDA slide that we put up earlier, it kind of goes across every single business process. And that's if
Yep.
you were to drive, and that's probably not even every single business process, but it covers a heck of a lot of them.
Yeah.
I haven't seen companies do that to that extent. Really, the companies that do that are the ones that are actually born in the cloud. They're data companies to begin with, and they've had the luxury of doing that. But if you're in a traditional
Right.
organization that's a legacy company, it's really difficult to catch up. But I would think if I were to look at that, if I was a CEO or CIO of an organization looking at that kind of potential within the organization, the first thing I would ask is, where do I want to invest at all? I mean, maybe some of these business processes, they're not part of our core value proposition as an organization. We really, we are a shipping company, so we're really going to focus on those business processes. This billing thing over here, maybe I'm just going to outsource it. Why spend any money on it? I mean, first you have to make a strategic decision on what are you going to lean in and invest on? What do you want to be best in class in your organization? So I would really kind of start there and then say, look, these are the areas that we really want to be best in class in. But even still, you might have half a dozen or more opportunities to go after all of those. So then it's really around looking for, well, can you do them all at the same time, right? Or do you want to do them one at a time? I mean, if those are two ends of the spectrum, doing them all at the same time kind of sounds scary. Doing them one at a time also sounds scary because, by the time you're done, you've already gone through 5 other CEOs by the time you finish with all that. So how do you find that balance between doing things at the same time, and what do you stack up? And of course, I think there's a couple of choke points that you're going to be looking at. Number one, there's no limit in technology, especially if you're building all this in the cloud. You could literally fire up all those machines all at the same time, and technology is not going to slow you down. Development resources, well, you're limited to the number of developers you have within your organization and or the number of developers you have access to. And again, if the value proposition is there's tons of third-party consulting and system integration companies that will help you build these things out. So you could get infinite scale in development through your partner network. But I think the real choke point is your company's ability to manage internal change, because that's all internal. And I mean, if you're going to have 4 different sales programs all at the same time, you're going to crumble your sales organization. So maybe you can do a predictive maintenance one over here in operations and a sales one simultaneously, and they're not conflicting with each other. So you just need to put all of these things into account. What's our strategic priorities as an organization? Where can we do things simultaneously? What are our internal constraint points? And I think what you're solving for is, how do I expand margin as fast as possible without hurting my business? And so that's really what you're trying to solve for. So I would, if you can safely do 2 or 3 of these simultaneously without disrupting your business, the faster the better, because your competitors are doing it. So
and I think there has to be some level of, and again, that goes back to the change part of managing that change, and how can you as a leadership and executive be able to focus on the right things within that, because you can't be focused everywhere, like you said. And
that's right.
I've been on teams where they try to implement too many new things at once, and then you're confused about what do you start using first, or how are you going to pull these things together, and that becomes very difficult to manage. So I like that. I know that's what you guys do on a day-to-day basis. Provisionally, I mean, you guys are working with clients to be able to understand what their footprint is, the types of things that they're doing, the types of challenges they face, and helping them put together that plan. So I know that's something that's probably it's very easy for you guys, or at least easier for you guys to kind of put together once you guys dig in deep to the understanding of the company is. So Ken, again, with all that experience, 30 plus years in this, and everything that you've been doing, what would you say was one piece of advice that you would give to the executives that are on here that are looking at this, and like I said, either they're looking at it proactively from their own, or they're getting it from the board, or wherever it's coming from, needing to kind of make some understanding of where we are on that level. Are we just waiting to see, or are we trying to protect ourselves? What advice would you give to them as far as how do we start thinking about these things and moving forward in the way that we need to?
Well, there's probably a lot of tips for success, but I would think that the one that's really on the top of the list for me, we've alluded to it already here. It's really around focus on the outcome. It's so easy, especially in this space right now, to get confused by shiny objects and promises of capabilities, and really the list of applications of AI within your company is long. I mean, you can keep going and keep reaping the benefits of deploying more automation and more intelligence across the company. So where do I start? I got too many opportunities. And then, so really focusing in on, let's go solve this problem, maybe these 3 at a time, no more, but what are we going to go do? And what's the outcome that we're trying to drive? Be very KPI outcome focused. What happens too often when these things struggle, when these programs struggle, what happens is you have a very specific goal you're trying to achieve, and then all of a sudden, out of the woodwork come all other kind of requirements that have been pent up over the years in that domain space, and they kind of overburden the initiative with things that aren't really relative to that outcome. And so it's really easy to kind of bog down. It's kind of like a drowning man syndrome, right? You got a program that's funded, heck, now everything's related to that program, and that can really drown your program and get you off focus. Your developers can over-engineer solutions because they may be enamored by the technology and so on. So there's a lot of ways for a program to go off course if you're not specifically and making every decision based on an expected outcome. And so that's probably the first piece of advice I would have.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. And for, and I know a lot of the people that we at least invited for this were the CFO at different levels of that as well. And I'm sure they appreciate that as well, to be able to understand, be able to have that time to understand the financial impact. And, it's not another tech decision as far as things that we want to do. This is an actual, it's an actual impact that's going well, it's an actual outcome that's going to impact the course of our financials that we have coming up. So that's awesome. And I think that goes back to, from TAG's point, is everything has to start from a leadership perspective, and being able to, have the right people, whether it's CIOs, CFOs, the executive board, and all those people who are in place to be able to manage these things, instead of just being, hodgepodge throughout this. So, Rob, we'll let you be quiet just for a little bit. I know it's killing you.
Happy to.
Any other last thoughts, as far as, you're kind of in the same vein as Ken, as far as from your experience in this, things that you want the audience to kind of take away from this, from your point of view?
Well, yeah, I mean, so other than the overarching that AI and automation solves business challenges that are key for this moment in time, AI and automation expands margins. I think the thing I would say beyond that is really, Tim, an extension of what you were talking around leadership and what we mean by that. And I think there's two aspects to leadership around this path to go get margin expansion that's really important. The first is, this really is a team of teams approach. As you think about the role that AI and automation can have across an organization, every senior exec has a role, right? Your IT organization, you think of first and foremost, right? Because they're helping develop and bring these tools to market for you. But what about the CHRO and the human resources organization's role in helping define what is the new job architecture around a part of a business, and how are we properly incentivizing our organization with these changes that are happening? Obviously the COO and their organization, ultimately they've got to take on the adoption challenge and make sure that they're putting their people in a position to be successful in driving out these changes. I think the finance organization we talked too little about. How do we have them help us make sure we keep very focused and regimented in our tracking of metrics in a way that's going to show up in the P&L and is going to be credible inside the organization? The chief, the legal officer, and what are we doing to make sure that we're accounting for regulation? This is a team of teams, and from a leadership perspective, to go drive these programs. And then the only last thing I'll leave you with, again, from leadership, oftentimes in some of these programs, the program leader or project leader gets deferred down to somebody kind of low in the organization. And is this truly the individual or individuals that are the top talent with the right mindset to drive not just incremental change, but step change inside of your business? Said another way, venture capitalists bet on founders as much as they bet on business ideas. And so inside of your organization, who are the people that you're betting on to lead this initiative successfully for you? It may not be the person you first think of, right? It maybe even somebody outside of the department, but that has a history of challenging convention or driving change, or is able to rally across a section of executives in the organization where they have a lot of trust, somebody that's focused on getting things done. Are you betting on the right talent in your organization? Maybe the second thing to consider.
No, love that, Rob. And I think that's spot on. Like I said, there's lots of ways to do this. Finding that right person to lead that charge, I think is huge in this. Let me, I don't see any other questions out there right now. Let me go ahead and share screens really quick again. Again, I appreciate everybody who's been able to join. We'll stick around. If there's any other questions, feel free to pop them in the question and answer session or chat or wherever you feel most comfortable. More than glad to kind of hang around and answer any questions on this. As we mentioned before, this is a series. It's a 4-part series that we did on this. The first one was demystifying generative AI. This one's more on, again, the margin expansions and how you can use it from a business and a financial perspective and the kind of impacts of that. The next one's going to be more on a cybersecurity look. So as you can see here, we've kind of making our way through friend or foe, the impact of AI on cybersecurity. And I'm sure it's, again, another keyword for a lot of you guys who are on here that you hear a lot of separately from this. But we're going to talk more about how they together are impacting the business, because unfortunately, with everything, cybersecurity kind of plays a role in everything. And so as AI becomes more pervasive in your organization, whether it's generative AI or the AI applications that we talked about today, cybersecurity has to be involved in understanding the implications of that is something that we want to make sure that we're addressing. And of course, the fourth one that we'll go through is the ensuring employee success in the age of AI. We're doing these almost about a month apart, so we don't have a set date for this, but we'll be getting that out to everybody who's on here very soon. Hopefully you can make that one as well again, and have appreciated the approach that we kind of taken with this, a little bit less technical, but more of really trying to dial in on the things that we understand and are hearing from the executives we're talking to and working with, the leadership teams that we're doing and the concerns they have, and trying to focus on those things so we can have those conversations. Again, the goal of this, again, is not just for us to get on here and talk, but to kind of open up that network of conversation so we can all kind of work together to really get a good grasp of this and understand for your business how it's going to affect you. So I think we've all kind of expressed, especially in the first one we did, but even this one, wait and see is not an option. Everybody has to do something. As you've seen, like Rob, you mentioned earlier, new legislation coming out yesterday. Your employees most likely are using some form of generative AI. Being able to control that and manage the risk that comes with that, and all the other things that come with these is something that you've got to be able to take a hold of. So we're excited to be able to have that conversation with you guys. We'll be getting more stuff out to you soon, and I was going to look one last time to see if there was anything. I did not see anything in Q&A. So with that being said, I think we're done. If there's anything else, please let us know. We're excited to be in contact with you guys again after this as well, and kind of let you know what's coming up next.